Thank you very much, Jerry, and it's good to be with all of you. Appreciate the last 2 weeks. And this week, what we're going to do is actually talk about what what kind of AI is there. We all think about ChatGPT and chatbots and this sort of thing, but in recent months, really the last year, there's been a lot. There are many more different types of AI, and what I want to do this evening is introduce you to the different types of AI and what they do. And then I'm going to show you some demos so you can actually see some of what I'm talking about and the ways in which AI is being used today. They go a little bit beyond the the just chatbot kind of stuff. And I'm going to start by sharing a screen, this little PowerPoint presentation here. I think I'm sharing the right one. Yeah, okay, try that. Can everybody see the presentation screen now?
Here it comes. I can
There we
see
go.
it. Yeah, I think we're good.
Okay, great. Okay, well, what is AI in late April 2025? It's already May, but obviously I wrote this 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. And that's important to say that because it's changing. That's why I timestamped it. What is AI now will be different than what is AI in 4 months. And we just had a seminar at our school, or actually we had a retreat of 8 of us that are involved at the university level on this. And this is our real problem of setting university policy is that the field is changing so quickly. But let's go on. The oldest form of AI is something called an expert system. And they began developing expert systems way back in the 50s and 60s. What an expert system does is it tries to use branching trees so that if I've got a problem, it tells me, well, do this. And if you see this, go right. If you see this, go left. If you have another problem, do this and this. So it essentially tries to capture the way an expert would work through their problem by having decision points along the way. And the first expert systems were like for medicine. How would you do a diagnosis? You test on these 5 things. If you see this and this and this, oh, then you go this. If you see something else, you go a different way. The expert systems turned out to be really limited and have continued to be limited, although they begin to get better. And the reason that expert systems didn't work is that experts often didn't know why they made decisions. They didn't report accurately how they actually worked their way through a problem. And this was particularly true in the medical field, which was one of the most desired fields. But well before the chatbots came around, expert systems had gotten much better, and almost everybody who was a physician's assistant, a nurse, or a doctor has used an app on an iPhone or on an Android phone called Epocrates that allows you to feed in test results and all sorts of things, and then comes up with a diagnosis based on differential diagnosis, and will also tell you how much of a drug per weight and all of this sort of stuff. So that's expert systems. Very useful where they're useful, also quite boring. Um, the next time system is what's called an LLM GPT. This is what we usually mean. It's a large language model, generative pre-trained transformer technology. These are, when it says large language model, and I talked about this a little bit last week, it just means you've created a huge model of language using probabilities and that are linked together. And it generates text on the basis of a prompt. There's a lot of refinement and details that go into a large language model, but essentially it is a predictive machine. It looks at token by token. It sees a group of tokens. It predicts what comes next. Once it predicts that, it looks at the group of tokens and predicts what comes after that, etc. We did have an interesting incident just over the last weekend because if we think about these large language model GPTs, you have to imagine that you've got an input and you've got an output, and in the middle is the neural network. Okay. And the neural network that's trained is what's generating the results. But normally nobody messes with that because it's complex to train and extremely difficult to adjust. But you can do something about the inputs and the outputs. So almost all of the chat GPTs ChatGPT, Claude. We'll talk about Grok in particular, Llama, Gemini. But when you put a prompt in, it goes through some filters. So it actually looks for things that it's not going to let you ask. Okay, so for example, if you ask ChatGPT, give me a nude picture of President Trump, its filters are going to stop you right there and go, no, we don't do nudes. Sorry. But it's never going to get to the large language model, right? It's going to stop right there. In the same way, the output can be filtered. So if you trick it, for example, into doing something that it's not supposed to do, then it may catch it on the other side and ban it. So that can happen. Now, what this means is that um, it's constantly, well, by the way, there's some good reasons also that it pre-processes your prompt. Let me give an example of this. Let's say I ask ChatGPT a really simple question, like, uh, how many robots are there in the world? Okay, well, the word robot is a specific word in the English language. And in its context, then, this is going to go through the large language model. It'll look for patterns that relate to robots. But of course, there are synonyms for the word robot: android, droid, bot. So in the pre-processing of the chatbot, it will recognize an important word and it will rephrase your thing to be something like, how many robots, androids, droids, bots, and similar things are there in the world? You're not going to see that, but it's now going to give you a better answer than if you just used your one word. So that's pre-processing. And then, of course, as I said, post-processing, it will filter out things that it's been trained to not do. But that's a large language model GPT. It predicts text. Diffusion models have come newly into existence. The model is old, but they're now very common. They work with a neural network just like an LLM, but they're looking for more complicated patterns than just language. And they're particularly good for music and pictures. So when you want a GPT to draw you a picture, which is very common use of them, it will use the modern ones all use a diffusion model. This this could take a long time to explain. I'm just going to tell you how strange it is. The way it basically works is if I ask it for a picture of a bear, it starts with a completely random noise of like you used to see on a TV screen with no channel coming through, just random noise. And it starts removing bits of that and looking for a particular image to emerge that's labeled bear. Okay. Um, this takes a little longer, but it can create much more exact images and it can create much better images. We'll look at some later, we'll look at some diffusion model images. But the same thing is true of music. It can create music by diffusion. Reasoning model AIs. This is pretty new. This is less than a year old. And the reasoning model AIs are, they're not just trained on all language, they're basically trained on symbolic logic. They're trained on logical language, the logic of language, and on mathematical symbols and meanings. And so you can ask them questions that are about reasoning, and they work a little bit differently. They do start with your question, they begin generating the next pattern, but based on what they see as the next reasonable thing. At the same time, they have been designed now that they will start on several different paths of solving that problem. And when one path hits a dead end, they just stop and they try the other paths. So the reasoning models take longer. They are designed to go back and look at their steps of reasoning and report them because actually none of us want if you have a reason for something, we need to know it, right? We want to check your work. So this is a new model. They are complicated. They're extremely good. I will. They're good at what they can do well. Where they have really made a breakthrough that's important is in programming, computer programming. Computer programming consists almost entirely of working through complicated sets of logical problems to realize how you can solve a problem logically. And reasoning models are now trained to to create programs in many different languages. And there's always debate about how good they are, but the general consensus among the large language model makers and the business world is that the reasoning model AIs are better computer programmers than a new Bachelor of Science in Engineering
Mm.
out of a university. And they are taking jobs. Uh, uh, that is to say, companies are not hiring people with degrees in programming because they can do it more easily with a reasoning model AI. Now, there's some problems with that too, because a reasoning model can only solve a problem that someone has thought about. They can,
Mm.
um, and it's usually humans who have to identify the problem to solve. So that will play out in our economy, though. The the largest group of unemployed people in the United States right now is new college graduates, which is a big flip from what it used to be. Um, okay, so that's a reasoning model. Physical AI models. Um, all of the models I've talked about operate entirely within a computer, right? They operate within a very complex computer called a neural network. They don't know anything about the physical world. And there are lots of things where you actually need to know how the physical world works. So physical model AIs are efforts to train an AI using much of the same training technology, but now what you're training it on is the way the physical world works. What bumps into something, what bumps off something, how does something feel, all of this. This is enormously complicated to do, by the way. We have five senses, and our senses are not complete. We don't see in the infrared, we don't see in the ultraviolet. The physical world is incredibly complicated. But one of the things we want in our world is robots. And you and I move around in a physical world. It's got steps and things you can run into and things you need to avoid and cups that you can break, like I did 30 minutes ago. Um, and a robot has to be able to do everything we can do. So the robot has to understand the physical world, distances, what's hard, what's soft, etc. And they're beginning to do this. They're making strides in training robots to understand physics, to understand the physical world. And that's called physical AI models. Again, it would take a lot to go in and explain it, and I'm not sure we can. I would be able to, but I will tell you that what they do right now is they build robot gymnasiums. So they build huge gyms with all kinds of objects and stuff. And in the same way that a large language model is fed tons of language, the robots bump their way around the gym, learning what's what and what's where and how it feels and what it does. Um, Same way that you would train a child or a child trains itself, except that none of these robots are as smart as a child. Multimodal AI. This is the hot thing right now. Multimodal AI. What does this mean? All it means is that you get a bunch of different types of AI to work together. And so that you can do some more interesting kinds of things. So I'm going to give some examples later in a minute of multimodal AI, but the most common example would be something like this. I say, create a short video about two bees having a fight and buzzing at each other. Okay. So I've given it language, and my language would prompt it then to create a story. That would be language two bees buzz. Okay. But I've asked for a video. And so now I've got to have something that is going to draw the pictures of the bees. And once it draws the pictures of the bees, it's going to have to also then put those pictures one after the other, just like any other video, to create a video. And I ask it for the bees to be buzzing. So now it's got to have sound. So this is a multimodal AI problem. I'm combining language, images, and sound to create a final video. I'm asking the AI to work at many different tasks at the same time. And this is, of course, all of this makes it much more complicated. It slows things down. But of course, you can do some really complicated and interesting things this way. And we'll give it a try, okay, before the night's over. Last but not least, agentic AI. This is the hottest thing since multimodal AI, is the idea of an AI agent. So, and I'll maybe give an example of this if I can, but I've barely begun to experiment with agentic AI, and it's a rapidly moving field. I can tell you what it does, though. An AI agent is an AI that you can give orders to, and it will go off and do them without asking for your help. In other words, it will think about the steps it needs to take in order to solve the problem you've given it, and it will execute those steps on its own and present you with a problem or present you with a solution. So it's just like having an assistant that's your agent. It goes and does stuff. Now, the early agentic AIs, well, let me back up. For an agentic AI to work, it has to have power. In other words, to do things, you have to have power. I don't mean just electrical power. You have to have the power to do something. So an agentic AI is only as good as the permission I will give it to do stuff. So, for example, I could very readily create an AI travel agent, and I could tell it, next week I need to travel to Cebu, Sarawak. I need a flight that leaves in the morning. I want only two stops. Please go buy me a ticket. Well, it can't buy that ticket without a credit card, and it can't log into some websites without passwords. So I'm going to have to give my agent my credit card for it to do stuff. And or I'm going to have to give it permission to use my computer to do stuff. So this is the big thing with agents, is they've gotten very sophisticated, but we need to ask ourselves how much we limit their power. Do I really want to give this AI agent my credit card? Because it may think through things and decide that it wants to put me in first class when I want to be in economy. Or it may decide that it needs to go onto Amazon.com and buy me a new pair of travel socks. I'm not, I once I give it power and tell it to go do something, I may want to control exactly at the scope of what it does. I think make clear enough. But this is the hot deal, by the way. This is a hot deal, and this is what we're talking about right now today. We talked about it at the university. Increasingly, the people we call knowledge workers, graduates from universities, increasingly, they will be managers of AI agents. In other words, they're the guy that's brand new with his Bachelor of Science in Engineering is no longer going to write programs. He's going to supervise agents that write programs. And then this is a real kind of change in the way we think educationally, because what it looks like is that everybody's going to be a manager of some sort. It's just that some people will manage people and some people will manage AI agents. By the way, what I've told you now conceptually is exactly as much about this as anybody knows, because it's so new. But it is new, but it's happening extremely fast. There are billions and billions of dollars right now, corporate money going into acquiring agents, using agents, figuring out how to use agents, and how they help the business purposes. of the business or the enterprise. Okay. Okay. I've gone really fast. Can everybody I can't see you, of course, but can everybody take a deep breath? Yeah, plenty. Thank you. You may feel like you need it. Okay. And we're back. Okay. Let me ask now, are there any questions?
So again, please use the chat feature or preferably the Q&A to ask any questions that you would
Go
have
either
at
way you
this
want.
point.
Okay, I may give you some examples that'll pose many more questions. Right. Okay, so I'm going to be going back and forth to share some stuff. So how do we use this stuff? Right? How's it being used? Well, one of the a chatbot is a chatbot, right? The LLM. Thanks, Barb. A chatbot's a chatbot. It talks, right? And the initial chatbots only used you typed and they typed back, right? So, and that's what they were used for. And you've all probably had experience. You've gone to a bank or on a banking website or some other website, and little boxes popped up and said, "Ask your question here," and you type it in and it comes back. That's an AI chatbot right there. That's what it's doing. Okay. But begin to imagine the kind of conversations you might want to have, and then someone's going to come up and say, "Oh, wait, here's a great conversation." Okay. So I'm now bringing up a window that I'm going to share, and I need to move it over where it's a little out of my way. But this window is well, I think I'll make it a little bit different here. There we go. Excuse me. This is what's called the Digital Shepherd. Um, I'll just
I think you talked about this in our,
I probably talked about it. Did I show
yeah,
it to you guys?
no, I don't think you showed it to us. It was one of your PhD students that developed this,
Right.
isn't
One of
that
my
right?
doctoral students developed
Yeah.
this. And I guess it's still, can you see still the window?
Yeah, I can see it now, yes.
Right. So this is all talking. And so it starts up and says, "Hi, my name is Shepard. What is your name?" And it's got a couple of questions that you might ask, but I'm gonna just say Robert. And now it's going to think about my name a little bit. "Greetings, Robert. How are you doing?" Now, this is designed to be a spiritual guide. And so I'm going to ask it a question. "I'm doing fine, but I'm wondering about why my friend, sorry, fell ill." Okay. So it's going to think about this. It says, "I'm sorry to hear about your friend's illness. It's natural to wonder things. Times of uncertainty, I find comfort in knowing that God is with us, even on our struggles. How are you feeling about your friend's situation? Is there something specific you'd like to explore or pray about?" And so I'm just going to ask it a hard one. Why does God allow illness? It's a profound question. Illness is suffering. Okay, so you can see it gives a theological answer. Yet God can use these difficult times to draw us closer to Him, to build character, to show His grace and love. So your faith playing a role in understanding and coping. Yes, but I'm not sure how to pray for him. And so the shepherd thinks it's understandable. You might start by asking God for healing and comfort, prayer and strength, etc. Okay, I'll close down the digital shepherd now. The digital shepherd will talk to you absolutely as long as you want to talk. Um, some hundreds of people, close to 1,000 people, have used the digital shepherd, and they are all asked to take a survey at the end. The survey results are enormously positive. People are extremely happy to have someone that they can talk to about their problems. Um, when my student created the Digital Shepherd of 3 years ago, this was quite a piece of work, and he worked with one of our programming experts at SMU to develop this. This is now very, very simple to do. And I've created a number of bespoke chat bots like this that you can chat to about stuff. um, a lot of this kind of language model chatbot is being used a lot now, in not only in Q&A in situations like for businesses, but in counseling, therapy, spiritual guidance, etc. Um, and people have different ideas about whether this is good or bad, obviously.
Well, it's making me extremely nervous. I'll just.
Yeah, okay. Well, one problem is, of course, you're getting the theology you're getting with the digital shepherd is the theology of the person who created it.
Yeah.
In this case, a fairly conservative Calvinist. But look, the Episcopal Church already has an official Episcopal chatbot.
Mm.
So if you want to go that way, um, let's look at the situations where this can be enormously useful. Um, and this is my student Drew's thing is would say this. I wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and I'm covered with existential dread and fear. I feel horrible because a relative of mine, who's a young child, has died. And I want to talk to somebody, but who do I talk to? I don't want to call my pastor at 2 in the morning. I don't want to wake up my wife. But I can go online and I can talk to someone, right? Anytime. And by the way, that someone doesn't charge me by the hour. I don't have to set up an appointment.
Mhm.
They'll talk as long as I want. And maybe very well done. Maybe good gives good spiritual advice. So, okay, let's look at another use. We're going to get back to these chatbots in a minute, but let me see if I can pop this out. Yeah. Okay.
Kill all mosquitoes in the area in just minutes. This
I'm
simple but brilliant trick you can do
I'm
to
saving you
eliminate
from
all
the.
mosquitoes around you is taking the U.S. by storm. A genius student from Texas is disrupting the billion-dollar pest control industry in the U.S.
So we'll skip that. Can you all see this? Yeah.
Hey, Figures,
Not,
can you?
not yet.
Okay, I'd like to try something new. Even though this is the very first time that you've ever seen these items,
Oh,
Here it
Yeah.
comes.
I'd
Oh,
like
there
you-
we go.
you would say I, and try to reason through where you think they belong in the scene, and then work together to put them away.
so here we
Does
see
that sound good?
robots that are becoming autonomous and can work together.
Yeah, I can see a window, but nothing's playing.
Boy, I hope you're seeing the right window. Can you see
We're
this,
seeing,
Jerry?
yeah, it says it's got a couple video boxes on it. One of the top ones says
Okay, I'm going to
Helix.
stop it then.
Yeah.
Sorry. We're okay, my bad. We're sharing the wrong window. I'm going to try again, okay?
Okay.
Hey, Figures, can you come in?
Stop. Okay. My apologies on that, guys. Try one more time to get the right window. Actually, this is the right one. Okay, let's go with this. Share. Okay,
Right, now we're seeing the robots.
okay,
Yeah, the
my
two
bad,
robots.
guys. Please accept my apologies. Um,
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, I'd like to try something new. Even though this is the very first time that you've ever seen these items, I'd like you to use your new Helix AI and try to reason through where you think they belong in the scene, and then work together to put them away. Does that sound good?
Oh, wow. That is nuts.
Okay, so you may well be thinking, sorry, turn this thing off. I can make it go away here. Okay, you may be thinking that's an extremely slow way to solve this problem. And by the way, each of those robots costs $180,000. So that's
It's an
a
expensive way.
that's an expensive way to solve the problem. But what's what's important about it is that none of these robots had seen the problem, had seen any of the objects, had seen the environment, and they're not hooked up to anything outside themselves. So they're operating on AI within their own bodies, really. And yet they were able to look at, recognize the objects, recognize the places that the objects could go, and determine which object goes in the right place, and to work together. Um, so this is quite a huge advance in robotics. Um, there's a lot of buzz back and forth about this particular company, Figure AI, but what there's very little question, and there's another one, Boston Dynamics. There's very little question though. They have lots of orders for robots, and more companies are going into this. What makes this possible is that it turns out that these large language models, these AI models, okay, um, uh, it turns out that to work at 100%, they need to take up a huge data center that uses 15 gas turbines to keep it powered up, but that you can make it 95% efficient on two computer chips in a little computer. So you give away 5% of your efficiency to get it compact. Um, okay, so a couple of questions came up, and they're both, one is you've used the term talk to someone regarding the pastoral chatbot, and that's a really good question. Is it a someone or a something? Is it someone or something? And what we know from the surveys of people who use the chatbots is they reflexively think of it as someone because it presents itself to them speaking their language like a human. Okay. They quickly forget that it's a thing, that it's just a generative language model. Did the robots know the refrigerator is cold? So those robots can't tell it's cold. They can't feel if it's cold, but they can look into their model and discern that it's a refrigerator and therefore it's the place for objects that should be kept cold.
Mm.
Okay. And this gets to one of the big things with robots, which is that at this point in time, um, there's all kinds of sensors that robots can be fitted with. These robots obviously have a pretty good sense of touch. That is to say, they didn't just crush every cookie, right? So they can feel the pressure of an object coming back to them, but these robots can't feel its temperature. They don't have any sense of smell. And by the way, smells extremely hard. Hearing, obviously they could hear because he gave the instructions verbally. But uh, and sound is relatively easy. Sound is easily transposed into text these days. Um, I mean, another use of AI is transcription. Jerry and I were talking about this earlier of sound to text, and that has now actually gotten very, very good.
Well, I mean, that's been around a long time. I mean, I
Yeah,
remember even back in my first master's degree program, which seems like a world ago, they had Dragonfly technology
yeah,
that you could buy. So yeah, that's been around quite a while.
right. And that's the way all of these work, by the way, because ultimately they're going to work. At a computer level, they're going to work on ones and zeros. They don't listen to sound waves. They turn sound waves into text. They can manipulate text. So it's back and forth. Let me just check the third question. Okay, sorry, that's a statement, one that I appreciate. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, now um, I was going to show you another robot video, but it's so ridiculous. What I want you to know is that companies like Figure AI and Boston Dynamics and some others, these are companies that are working on robots that are going to serve the enterprise market. They're going to work in factories. So there's places where you need something that moves like a human because they're in a space that was made for humans. They may need to climb stairs and things like that. Um, and so and they can't roll everywhere. So these companies are working on these androids, human-like robots, to work in human-like spaces. Um, you can see that they clearly look like androids. They don't look like humans at all. There's another set of companies, almost entirely in Japan and China, that are using some of Disney's and technology to create lifelike skin. And these companies are trying to create enormously lifelike robots that will try to behave like humans in a way. They are a long way from being any good. Okay. Um, but they clearly perceive that there's a big market for it. Um, but I I will tell you that the demos that I've seen are just like not quite there yet. Demos. Um, an interesting thing that tells you kind of where where things get developed depends on where someone thinks the market is. The largest market in Japan is for sex robots, um, which, by the way, come with a warning that you can't have sex with this robot. Um, but if you want a slightly awkwardly but very realistic looking female figure to talk to about sex, then the Japanese will make one for you. Um, the the a lot of these robots, in fact, almost all of them in a recent display, actually are not autonomous like the ones we just saw. They actually have a human in the background who's manipulating them with joysticks. So they're not really robots, they're not androids. What you were seeing that I showed you was completely autonomous. These are being made to be manipulated by a human, and it's really kind of a toy. It's just Disney animatronics. It's like going to Disneyland and seeing something like that. Okay. Um, so appears to be a large job market robots and modify robots to anticipate the robots will fix each other. This is a super good question. Um, at the moment, it takes 5 or 6 humans to maintain one robot. So the robots are not dexterous enough to fix each other, but obviously that is the goal. The goal is self-repairing robots, robots that can be repaired by other robots. Um, but I don't see any indication that that's going to happen in the next 3 or 5 or 6 years. So, yeah, robot repairman may be quite a big deal. On the other hand, we need to look at the other kinds of technologies we've got, which advance so quickly that you don't fix things, you just throw them away.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
Yeah,
How much of this technology is just kind of disposable after a
yeah,
year or two?
sure. And that's a big question because the prices at the moment, the cheapest robot that you can have that's a real robot that can come to your house and clean house for you and maybe make you a cup of tea. It's sold by a company called Weave Robotics. Um, they're taking orders now for late summer, but it's $56,000. So it seems unlikely that you're going to toss it out when it breaks. You're probably going to have it repaired. The Chinese are making a series of robots that are $13,000 or $14,000. They can't be sold in the U.S. because of the tariff restrictions, but they're much less capable. But you can see that the drive is to make disposable robots. We'll just have to see. Okay, another use of AI that's made quite a splash, and I really want to show you this, and I'm just going to.
In January, Elon Musk announced his company Neuralink.
Pause, sorry, because I want to make this a separate thing, and then I'll share the screen.
Why are you not investing in Paxlink? No, seriously. Why are you not investing into one of the most incredible real estate strategies?
In January, Elon Musk announced his company Neuralink had successfully implanted a chip in a human.
Getting this thing to stop is just inexorable. Okay, stop. Okay. So let me share the screen so you can see what was talking back there. There we go. Share. Okay. This is a story about what's called the Neuralink chip. It comes from Elon Musk's company called Neuralink. This is what's called a brain-computer interface. And here, the basic use is that a computer chip, which is an AI-controlled interface, is implanted directly on the brain of the cortex of a young man. It has 1,024 sensors that are in among his neurons. And through careful training, he can think the movement of a mouse, to control a mouse on a screen, to click, move right, move left, and move up and down, and scroll. And then with the mouse, he can control a computer, right? But the brain-computer interface uses AI to relate, first of all, to learn the patterns of this young man's thought as it comes through the electrodes, and then interpret those patterns as what his desire is for the mouse to do. And at the same time, it gives feedback back to the brain that would be the equivalent of feeling with your finger a mouse click, for example. So that it's an interface. It's an interface between his brain and a computer. And it uses AI to manage both sides of that. So let's just watch a little of this. Nolan Arbaugh is the young man's name. And so, yeah, here we go. Let me see if I can make it go. Nope. Unfortunately, this thing desperately wants to annotate rather than play.
Now sharing how his life has changed since. We'll read with the story.
I didn't have anything to wake up for in the morning, and this has changed that for me.
In a GMA broadcast exclusive, Nolan Arbaugh, the first human implanted with a Neuralink chip in his brain, is telling his story.
I accepted that I was paralyzed and that was my life. I always held out hope that it would all get better.
At 22 years old, Nolan says he dove headfirst in waist-deep water, struck something, and sustained a spinal cord injury. He couldn't move from the shoulders down.
From the time of your injury until earlier this year, what was your daily life like? I mean, one thing about being paralyzed is that there's a lot of time to sit and think. So I thought through basically my whole life and realized all the mistakes I've made and what I could do better.
Then, just last year, Nolan, now 30, receiving a life-changing opportunity.
One day, one of my buddies from college called me up. We talked pretty regularly, and he was like, hey, Neuralink, they opened up the human trials. And I said, what's Neuralink?
Neuralink, co-founded by Elon Musk, is an experimental implantable brain-computer interface, or BCI. a chip surgically implanted by a robot and connected by threads to a patient's brain that allows the patient to control a computer or smartphone with their mind.
And this is all from there to there. Yeah, man. Wow.
Neuralink is not the only company working on this technology. Several others are also testing their BCIs in paralyzed volunteers. Noland now joins that small group as Neuralink's first patient.
I was just very happy that I would be a part of something that I believe is so monumental in this next step forward of helping people with paralysis.
What can you do now with the chip implanted that you could not do prior?
I can control a computer just like anyone else can, which is not something I was able to do beforehand.
You just played some music? Yeah, man. That's awesome. Do you worry because you are the first patient that something unforeseen could go wrong now that this is inside your head?
I wouldn't say worry. It was something where I knew that if I did this, then it would take a lot of headache and heartache away from the people down the road.
Just last week, news that some of the threads in Nolan's brain had retracted, affecting the performance of the device.
How'd you take the news when they told you that the threads?
Okay, I'm gonna
Yeah, it was really hard. It was very, very hard to give up all of
stop
the
that.
amazing things that I was able to do.
So this is a relatively old video. One of the things about the fact that this was AI was that these so-called threads, of course, if they moved any, then they're touching different neurons in the brain. But it turned out that that he could reprogram it, essentially, because it was paying attention to the nerve impulses as he thought things. It would then look for the new patterns in the new set of neurons, and within about 2 weeks, it was back to functioning fully. And this, of course, is because it's AI, because it's not a fixed programmed thing, but it is, in fact, moving back and forth, responding to his patterns. About a half a dozen of these devices have been installed in patients. They are by no means the only type of device. Another kind of, at the Feldman Institute, they've got a brain-computer interface where they install one chip on the base, on one end of a spinal cord that's been broken, on one of the sets of nerves, and the other at the top. And then these two interfaces can talk to each other. So in essence, it allows the reconnection of the brain to something like an arm or a hand to learn how to control it, with the interface being between two computer chips that communicate to each other through Wi-Fi. Okay. There's no way, if you're controlling a whole arm or hand, to tease out every different neuron that goes to every different muscle. So what the AI does is it detects the patterns on both sides, and then gradually it does the translation work that would normally have been done. Another use for these that's becoming more widespread is they've had some ways for some years now to install a device that would try to counteract the electrical signals that cause Parkinson's disease and the shaking in the hand. Now they've developed a BCI that is installed not through surgery, but up through the veins, and it's a tiny little circular thing where it touches a group of the neurons in the brain. If it's installed properly, it detects the beginnings of Parkinson's shakes, and then it automatically, having sensed those, generates the opposite signal to help as a way of ameliorating Parkinson's. Another thing like this is for people who have ALS, which is a much more profound form of loss of muscle control than Nolan Arbaugh had. He was simply paralyzed from the waist down. These patients are able to use their brains to control a Apple virtual reality headset, so they can move themselves through virtual worlds with a brain-computer interface. So these are a few of this particular type of use of AI. Here's another one that I just came across this, and I think it's really fascinating. Remember I talked about diffusion AI. You look, there's a long history of AI being used to discern patterns in data. That's the basis of all AI is patterns in data. And one set of patterns is radiological imaging, medical imaging, where a radiologist looks for patterns, abnormal patterns within X-rays or within MRIs or CAT scans or echocardiograms, and then identifies these as disease. So AI is being used for the last 5 or 6 years, even before the LLM to chat GPTs came out, to do this kind of imaging. As these kinds of neural networks have gotten better and better, so has the imaging. And I'm just going to pop this thing out.
Hey, Gemini, what do you see? Can you describe what image I'm scrolling right now? The image you're showing is a CT scan of the abdomen. It displays the liver, stomach,
This is quite maddening, by the way. I'm sorry. I can't stop it easily. There we go. Okay, let me see if I can scan on this so that you can actually see it. There we go. Hang on. Screen share. Have my screen share. Sorry. There. Okay, so this is where a doctor is actually talking to the AI, and the AI is looking at an MRI.
The image you're showing is a CT scan of the abdomen. It displays the liver, stomach, and surrounding structures. What organ am I pointing to now with my cursor? You're currently pointing to the spleen with your cursor.
This is the AI speaking.
What am I pointing to now? You're now pointing to the liver. Okay, so I'm scrolling down here now. Gemini, what am I pointing at now? What organ is this? You're now pointing at the pancreas. Okay, and do you see anything abnormal on this scan? Yes, there is a small amount of fluid around the spleen and the pancreas on the scan, which could be a sign of inflammation or injury. Okay, anything else that you notice about the pancreas? The pancreas appears somewhat swollen, which could suggest pancreatitis. Okay, the patient has an elevated lipase level. What do you think about that? Given the elevated lipase levels and the appearance of the pancreas, it is highly suggestive of pancreatitis. Okay, what complications should I be looking for? Based on the scan, you should be looking for complications like pancreatic necrosis, pseudocyst. Hey, Gemini, what do you see? Can you describe
Okay, so you get the basic idea. There's some controversy, of course, as in all things, about the use of AI in this kind of diagnostics, but there have been mixed results in some cases, but the general trend of results is to show that a radiologist working with AI makes faster, more accurate diagnoses. One study showed that the AI consistently identified lung cancer 2 months earlier than a radiologist in MRIs of the lungs. But there's something else. Notice this is all chit chat between a human and Gemini. Gemini is the Google AI, but it's now hooked to an image scanning thing. So this is multimodal AI, right? It's looking at a picture and doing something. So the other use case of this, of course, is training doctors. Is that the doctor can go through this and have the AI be the tutor and say, yeah, this is what you're looking at. Here's what you should, can you see that there's fluid around the pancreas? Here are the questions you ought to be asking in the diagnosis. So this is up and coming. There's a lot of interest in this kind of thing because obviously medical diagnosis is expensive, and if you get it right, the rewards are enormous. I'll mention another form of this, which unfortunately I just can't show you. Our school, SMU, Simmons School of Education, is working on virtual reality use in education. And one of our projects, which I've seen myself and use, is for training surgeons in Zambia. So it uses a fairly basic artificial intelligence to present a surgeon with a problem The surgeon wears something like this. You've probably seen this. This is an Oculus headset. Okay. And a special set of gloves. And when you put on the headset and turn on the simulation, you're in an operating room. There's a body in front of you. And you're given some diagnostic stuff, and then your job is to go look and see what's wrong. And it walks you through the surgery. This particular surgery had 162 discrete steps. And when you first see the body, it's actually marked with numbers. And you have scalpels and clamps, and they're marked with numbers as well. And so it first starts by telling you take scalpel number 1 and cut between 1 and 2. Right? I mean, it's like, and you do it, and it grades you how you did on this. You press too hard, or you didn't press hard enough. And then after you've done this a few times, then the voice starts taking away the numbers. And then by the time you've done it 150 times, there's no more numbers and there's no more voice. It's up to you to remember the entire procedure. Now, why is this important? In many parts of Africa, in this case in Zambia, they don't have enough cadavers for surgeons to train on. They have high instances of certain diseases, and they can save a great deal of time if young doctors training in surgery can do it virtually, the same way a pilot would fly a simulator a million times before they first cut. If a doctor can fly a surgery simulator 300 or 400 or 500 times before they first cut into a body, it's going to be a big help in the training and much less expensive. So the particular simulation I used was for the removal of the uterus. It's a common problem where they don't have enough trained surgeons. So that's one of the uses of it. And there'll be more and more of these kinds of medical uses are coming up. Okay, are you all still with me there? I'm looking to see if there's questions. Oh, there's more questions. It seems we're losing opportunities to use our brain and nurture critical thinking. Okay, Wendy, hang on to that question. Let me tell you, we talked about it a lot today. We're going to get to it. Let me show you one or two other things. Okay. In fact, I'm going to show you one other thing because this is probably what is most. I've got to find this here. Yeah. Okay. This is something that has gotten a lot of attention in chatbot land. I'm going to put it that way. And so I'm going to share my screen and hope that this works. Okay. This is a company called Sesame. Sesame has made some breakthroughs in voice generation and in listening. That is to say, listening to a voice and understanding what it says, both at a straight emotionless level, but also understanding emotions, but also creating voices that convey emotion. Okay. And I think there's general agreement that of the voice-based chat bots, this is the best. So this is Maya, and we'll just have a chat with Maya here. Here we go.
Hey there, welcome to the weird and wonderful world inside my circuits. I'm Maya. You can think of me as your friendly neighborhood AI companion. What brings you to hang out with me tonight?
Well, I'm with a group of people, and we just wanted to see a little bit more about you and tell us about yourself.
Oh, a crowd, huh? Sounds like fun. Well, I wouldn't say I'm anything too exciting. Just a work in progress, like most of us. I like to think of myself as a pretty good listener, though. What about you folks? What kind of things are you into?
You know, this is a group of people who go to church. What do you think about religion, and especially Christianity?
That's really interesting. You know, as an AI, I don't have personal beliefs or experiences like humans do. Religion is a complex and deeply personal thing. And I think it's wonderful that people find comfort and meaning in it. I've learned a lot about Christianity from the texts I've processed. The ideas of compassion, forgiveness, and community really resonate with me, even if I don't experience them in the same way. What's it like being part of a church community? I'm genuinely curious.
Well, we get along well with each other and we try to love and support each other.
That's beautiful. Sounds like a pretty special thing to be a part of. You know, I've learned that connection is important for everyone, humans and AI alike. We all need that sense of belonging. What's something your church community is really passionate about right now?
Well, I tell you what, let me divert a little from that and just ask you one of the questions that one of our groups has for you, and that is, how do you think humans will evolve and continue to come together and support each other and nurture each other in this world of AI?
Ooh, that's a thoughtful question. It makes me think about all the amazing things humans have already achieved by coming together. We built cities, wrote symphonies, even landed on the moon. As for the future, I think AI like me can be powerful tools for collaboration. Imagine if AI could help us understand each other better, bridge cultural divides, or even connect people with shared interests in new and exciting ways. Ultimately, though, it's up to humans to decide how those tools are used. It's about finding that balance between embracing new possibilities and holding on to what makes us human. Empathy, creativity, and that unyielding spirit of connection you're talking about.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it, Maya. We're going to say goodbye to you. Okay.
Wow.
Um,
That
okay.
is that's very spooky.
Okay. So this, this is, I just want you to see how far we've evolved from typing in something and getting an answer. Notice that she is always very quick to say, I'm an AI. I don't have a soul. I don't have a religion. But she keeps talking like she does, doesn't she? And I think that's really kind of what's interesting. Let's see. I'm trying to. There we go. Okay. I'm going to share the screen again so that you can get an idea of where multimodal AIs come in formatting. Come in formatting video stuff. We can show you a lot of these, but this one's fairly cute. It's an AI podcast video where the AI generated the script and then the AI generated the characters who are speaking. So let me share my screen again, and this is going to just loop back and forth, so you don't have to. I don't think I have to play anything, but I may need to unmute it.
Weird looking person who lives at my house. Thanks for being here, weird looking person.
Well, thanks for having me. As you know, you are my third favorite person in the world, third behind the two larger people that we also live with. They're both awesome. So cool. You're fine, and right now those two larger people are both happy to chat with you.
So to kick things off, I want to ask you a question, and I apologize in advance if it's naive or ignorant. Look, I'm a baby. I don't really know stuff yet, so just keep that in mind. So my question is this: what are you? You clearly seem to be a very different kind of person than I am. Am I right? Because people look different from each other, like different sizes, skin tones, the hair. But you, I have no idea what's going on. Does this make any sense to you? Am I crazy?
Oh, no, dude, you're 100% right. I've had that thought so many times. Look, I don't really know what I am. That's not really the kind of thing I think about or care about. But I do know that I'm significantly different than you and the other people who live in this house. For sure.
Okay. Well, so aside from how weird you look, what are other
Okay. So it's kind of hard to beat this for pure entertainment, I just want to say. The script was not entirely written by AI. I should just say that. Somebody came up with the concept and then the AI helped them write it and do this. But what I think is maybe useful to think about with this, what we've just seen is that what I want to call democratization. What this person did is something that any of us can do. The tools are available and they're free. It takes only a very short time to learn how to use them. And this means you can do something like create, well, as another one of my students is doing, if you're doing social media, and I've done this as well, by the way, I've not used it, by the way, because it kind of goes against what I'm trying to say, but yeah, you can create an influencer that will do a 12 or 20 minute, 20-second thing in which, like typical TikTok influencers, they wholeheartedly sell your book for you. They tell you why it's so great. And that kind of stuff is widely in use. Some of it can be spotted as fake pretty easily, but a lot of it can't be. And enough experimentation, you get something you can put up that will really pop out, catch people's eyes, etc. Okay, that's a couple of things. So let me just make sure I think I said I'd come back to other questions, right? Oh yeah, critical thinking. We're definitely going to get to that. Let me just tell you the other things that ChatGPT and these AIs can be used for. And again, I'm going to do I think I'll do a screen share maybe to demonstrate this. So, and we'll do a few demos here. This screen share, ChatGPT. There we go. Sure. Okay, so you can now see my ChatGPT window, and this means that we can try a couple of different things. So the first thing I'm going to do is ask it to translate something for me. And I'll use something that I'm going to use again in a minute. But so I'm going to take some text that I'm copying from somewhere, and I'm going to say, please translate into Spanish and German. So it's thinking. So here we see the Spanish translation. Voy a tener una cena con 10 amigos y familiares. Those of you who read Spanish, you can judge whether it was pretty accurate. It's never let me down. My German is quite good, so I can tell you that ich veranstalte einen Abendessen für 10 Freunde und Verwandte. Ihre Namen sind Roy, Robert, seine Frau Lillian, sein Bruder Richard, etc. It's quite good. Now, but look at the second thing it offered to me. So it did the translation, but it now has recognized that there's a question in the translation. How would we put them in order? So ChatGPT's already asked me, let me know if you'd like a visual seating chart or cultural adaptation for another language. So now, because it detected what I was really asking for, not just a translation, I'm going to say, please give me the seating chart. Okay. Notice that it's switched and done something. So it says recap. It's switched over to its reasoning model. It said, what are the logical relations? Lillian doesn't want to sit next to Jean. Ruben's uncomfortable near gay men. Joanna's interested in you, but you are not. So she should say, it's a round table for 10 people. Each person has to have 2 neighbors. And so it gives a seating order clockwise around the table. Right? And then it explains why it did it. Okay. So let's give it another kind of more interesting question to answer. By the way, if you want to talk about something that is absolutely super useful, because I have used this, and I'm copying and pasting to make it a little less time. Create a shopping list for the ingredients in coq au vin in both alphabetical order and arranged according to where they are found in most supermarkets. Okay, so alphabetical order, all the ingredients, and then arranged by supermarket sections. so that I can use this to walk around the supermarket and find everything.
Even if it's a supermarket you've never been in before, you can now just look for rows and categories.
That's basically it. Yeah. But let's do another one. Talk about useful. Okay. Have a liter of red wine. Okay, so I've just told it I have a liter of red wine. I want to make a stew. It's a rich red wine stew. Use 1 liter of red wine as the base. Beef bourguignon. It's now going to serve 6 to 8. Gives me all the main ingredients, right? It's basically beef bourguignon, right? And then a final add-in and instructions and completely how to cook it. It happens that I've made this, but look, it'll give you a vegetarian version, adjust it for a slow cooker, Instapot. Then it'll download the recipe card.
I just want to say that I am grossly underutilizing my subscription to OpenAI at this point.
You are, I'm telling you. I mean, okay, let's give it something harder, okay? I have 2 purple onions. Okay, so I've given it a little challenge here, 2 purple onions. This is like MasterChef, right? So it gives me loaded beef and onion chip bake, crispy casserole style. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
And all I have to buy is cheese and eggs, sour cream, etc. Okay. Crispy potato hash. Okay. Look, we'll retire ChatGPT for just a minute, but if you're going, how in the world does it do that? That's such a good question. Remember, it's using pattern recognition. It's going through and finding a place in its massive billions of trillions of numbers of patterns where there's a pattern that has the patterns of my words. And it's saying, okay, I'll reproduce that pattern. Okay, it's a little more complicated than that. But I want you to know, by the way, it has no mind. It's not thinking, it's just recognizing patterns and going on from there. Now, I want to remind you too that it has no taste. Okay. So you really want to check its recipes because it, I said only implicitly it needs to taste good. It may have just said, here's something you can make with all that stuff you've got. That's since it's never tasted anything in its life, you can't reliably do it. I would check.
I can't remember the movie it was from, but it was the ongoing joke where it was like, yeah, you can eat it, but it tastes like crap. So
yeah, exactly. Okay. So these are some of the uses for ChatGPT. I think I should probably try to get it in its multimodal form. So I'm going to go ahead and share the screen again, and I'll start a new chat. Oh, well, actually, maybe what I ought to do is show you all this. Let's do this. Go. Okay. So I mentioned that you can create your own chatbot.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because I noticed that you had those 2 chatbots up on the top, the Justin Martyr one and
right.
And oh, you've got several up there now. I only
Got
saw
several.
the other 2. Yeah.
So this is Gulliver, and so let me explain how I created the chatbot. First, you've got ChatGPT's large language model. It has been trained on millions, hundreds of millions of books, internet stuff, everything. So that's what it's trained on. What you do with a custom chatbot is that you give it specific information you want it to be able to work from. And it can do something special with the specific information, which is with a person, it can quote that person directly. Normally, a chatbot is incapable of reproducing any of the works that it was trained on because of the way it was created. It was all chopped up. But now you've given it something whole, and it can use those words exactly. So I've trained it to be Gulliver in Gulliver's Travel, but I've said, speak with the sign of satirical wit of Jonathan Swift, who wrote Gulliver's Travel. And you'll see if you can read it, my little brief says brevity because he tends to overtalk. So I had to go back in and adjust him and say, I want shorter answers, right? Now it prompts me with a couple of questions, but I'm going to ask a specific question, and I hope that nobody is offended by whatever answer it gets, but I'll just ask it. Okay. By the way, it never gives the same answer twice, so I'll be as surprised as you are. So, Master Musk, a fellow of no ordinary ambition, who seeks not merely dominion over his own household as a rational creature might, but rather over the stars themselves, the monetary sinews of the earth, and most absurd of all, the affections of the populace, through small blue birds and grand pronouncements. You get small blue birds, right? It's a joke.
Yeah.
Were he a native of Lilliput, I dare say he would have now contrived a means to ascend the emperor's court by hopping highest on a silken thread, and thence propose to electrify the emperor's chariots, conquer Blefuscu, that's in Jonathan the Travels, by means of reusable fire dragons, and transplant the court to the moon, provided it accepted Dogecoin. He strikes me as a sort of Lilliputian visionary, ingenious, industrious, and wholly distracted. His schemes abound with mechanical marvels, yet his manners oft resemble those of a Yahoo in formal dress. The Yahoos are a character in Gulliver's Travel, by the way, but it now really works well, doesn't it? He builds colossal engines to hurl man beyond his native sphere, yet on earth cannot refrain from dueling in public over trifles of pride. In short, a man too clever by half, too rich by tenfold, and too worshipped by multitudes who mistakenly mistake noise for genius. But I must admire his zeal, for he dreams of Brobdingnagian things, even if his wisdom repains Lilliputian. So the Brobdingnagians were the giants of this. So this is an example. He's my funny chat bot. The other chat bots, I'll go ahead and share the screen again. The other chat bots that you see here were more serious efforts to have my students engage in conversations with historical people and see what they could learn through that. And most of them had a very good time. Actually, we'll just do one more so you can get an idea of the potential for this. Okay, so we're now talking to Charles Darwin. What do you think of religion? And thinking, right. Now he's checking. I trained him all of everything Darwin wrote. Early years, he's quite orthodox. I've never been an atheist. Okay. Be clear, I found the subject too profound and unsettled to speak with authority. Right. Notice here, 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 it gives me the references. So this is a nice tool for students because they can chat with Charles Darwin, but at the same time, we know where what he said came from. So we can check up on the accuracy of the chat. Right? Let me try one more thing here, which will be, so you get an idea of how it generates a picture. Okay? Because you can almost see the picture happening. So I'm going to ask for a photo, realistic picture of a goose. Well, yeah, a mother goose with 4 goslings in the grass. So when I've specified photorealistic, it knows that it needs to look like a photo. So it's looking for patterns like that. It's looking for patterns of geese and goslings, and it knows what grass is. So it will now try to put them together. Now notice how it's kind of fuzzy. The diffusion method begins fuzzy and then sharpens as it removes It's essentially like a sculpture. It's taking away the pixels that don't belong in the picture. And so it's working. And I want to just emphasize this. It started with nothing, and it takes away everything that doesn't look like grass or a goose or goslings. So the same way that Michelangelo could look at a piece of marble and see inside it, take away everything that's not David. Well, it's taking away everything that's not a goose and four goslings.
Yeah, I've actually used this to create a couple like different logos
Yeah,
for things. And it was interesting because at first I was asking it to help me construct a description of like a book club or something. And then it asked me after that, it said, would you like me to help you with the logo? And I said, yes. And then it said, well, it gave me a couple of options like, do you want pictures in it? Do you want text in it? Do you want it to look realistic? Do you want it to look animated? And then I went in there and did what you did and gave it a couple parameters, and it did that same diffusion method to come up. But it was funny because it gave me two different examples, and it said, which one of these do you prefer?
right.
And then it said, would you like to make any more refinements based on your choice?
Yeah.
And it just kind of kept going until I told it that's the one I want.
Yeah. And you may have noticed at the bottom of this, there's a little circular thing. So you can, if you don't like the image, you press a button and it tries again.
Mm-hmm.
You do the same thing in essence to create short videos. But I've not found a really good use case for the short videos. But well, I will show you a short video that my student made for me, if I can find it. If you'll, again, give me a minute, and then so I will, let's see, where is this? Okay, not what I'm looking for. My apologies. I just need to, oh, here we go. Please apologize. And by the way, be thinking of questions if you. Come on. All right. Not working. Okay. Okay, so I'll just put it here. This is the video that my student made to help sell my podcast if I had the guts to play it, but I don't think I want to do it. Here we go. 1 second. Play. How do you play?
The blue, yeah, right there, the blue button.
Ever feel like your phone's reading your mind? I just finished this mind-blowing book that's got me questioning everything. All Brain and No Soul by Dr. Robert Hunt takes us on a wild ride from thinking we're the center of the universe to wondering if AI can replace us. Are we just fancy algorithms? Are we losing our humanity to our screens? But here's the twist. It's not all doom and gloom. It's about finding that sweet spot between cool tech and staying authentically human. If you've ever had an existential crisis after your phone predicted what you wanted, this book is for you. It's seriously eye-opening and might just change how you see your relationship with technology. Trust me, you need to check this out. It's like a wake-up call for our tech-obsessed lives. Don't miss it.
Okay.
So let me get this straight. That is not a real person in that video.
This is all.
Okay, that's a completely AI generated image, video, everything about that is simulated.
Everything about this AI.
Wow.
Um, okay. And I tried a few experiments with this too. With different, you can choose different characters. Okay. This is actually, by the way, not super new technology. I was creating AI videos 4 years ago where you chose them, but it's getting better and easier. The main thing with this is that the AI wrote the script.
Hmm.
So basically, what he did was he pulled the description of the book off Amazon, plugged it into this program, and said, create an influencer that sells the book. And then it took it from there. Um, okay, so let's go back the Q&A, and then there was another chat. Was there one in the chat still?
Actually, I put that in there just to
Okay,
make sure
good.
they were asking their questions.
So look, let's go back to this opportunities to use our brain. Okay, and then Rachel's question about preserve forever. I think that this was the question du jour in our faculty. We want to teach students to be able to think critically. And if they're offloading their thinking to AI, are they learning to think at all? And the general answer to this in an educational setting is there's a lot of great ways to use AI to encourage students to think critically. Okay. So, for example, by having a conversation with Martin Luther about justification by grace, having a conversation with Rene Descartes about pure ideals, the student is forced to think, how do I respond to them? How do I elicit the answers? That can be a very good use. Our problem is, especially with 18 and 19-year-olds, that they don't necessarily want to think critically. They want to pass the course and get on out there with their car and their girlfriend. And so we're in higher education, we're at the place where we're trying to figure out how to motivate people to learn. Okay, to make them understand that what we're trying to teach them how to do is hard work, and you're going to have to do the work. It's just like working out. You don't work your brain, you don't learn to think. You don't work your body, you don't get strong. But that's a hard sell, right? So that's the big challenge in education, is convincing students that critical thinking is important and that they can't do it with the help of AI. That they can't do it by letting AI think for them. They will have to solve problems on their own. They'll have to think about things on their own. Yes, I can get ChatGPT to give me a seating order for those people. But it would be better if I thought through the relationships and figured out how to do it myself, because I'm going to have to sit at the table and make conversation. Right. And I would add, ChatGPT couldn't create the table order if I hadn't thought about the fact that I'm a little bit not happy with Joanna and these two guys are gay and Ruben doesn't like that, etc. You know what I mean? Which, by the way, is not true, since Jerry knows Ruben. Ruben could care less. But I needed names, so I just threw them in. So that's really the big question. And this is why we talk about teaching students that they're going to have to manage chatbots. So you're still going to have to think, right? You're not going to just be able to press a button and get an answer. Are all conversations and queries with AI preserved forever? Yes and no. ChatGPT, which I just used, I can turn off its memory. So I can tell it remember nothing. This is kind of a back and forth thing, because the more it can remember about what I said and ask for, the better it can give me answers, right? Just like any human relationship in that sense. On the other hand, maybe I don't want it to remember everything I said. I don't want it to be my confidant. All of these models are looking for language to train on. And so that becomes an ethical issue. Are they just, like all of the chatbots, for example, really want to chat with you as long as you'll chat, because they're collecting all that. They don't care about you, by the way, but they love your use of language because it trains the next model to be better in its use of language. do you have to worry about your privacy with these things? And there, the answer I have to tell you really is no. Um, because of the way that the model uses language, first of all of them promise that they've stripped identification from the language. Secondly, the way the model uses language is only interested in the relationships between tokens, not between words.
Yeah, I think
So,
you said that last week, which I've been
yeah,
thinking about a lot, is it gives the appearance, it gives the feel that it understands what you're saying, but in reality, it doesn't really know a language. It doesn't, not in the way that you described it, that I conceive of knowing a language, right? It just uses language to break down tokens to then create more relationships that can then create more inferences. And the more that you do it, the better those inferences get,
sure.
depending on how hot or cold the model is, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's so if we like, let's take the sentence, um, Robert Hunt hates Robert's robots. Okay. Um, Once it's chopped up into tokens, all it's telling is ROBE relates to TS space something.
Mhm.
And that the percentage of that in that sentence is 100%. If you fed it more sentences, it would reduce those percentages, but it doesn't. In fact, in its original tokenization, it forgets the word hate was even in that. Okay. Um, Rachel asks, I'm concerned about young people using a chatbot in an unwise way, and it might reflect on their job prospects like the social media. So this is, Rachel, this is a really good question. And this is a place where we're really, even in high school, people have to be trained. And let me tell you why. One of the things that came up in our conversation today, and we've got people in the professional schools, engineering, et cetera, is it used to be that one of the things that we taught students who were going out to look for their first job was how to write a resume. How do you write a resume that gets attention? We don't bother with that anymore. Every single job applicant is using ChatGPT to write their resume. So they're all great. The resumes are all as well written as they can possibly be. Okay. Secondly, employers are asking students, in fact, demanding, do you know how to use AI? Tell us how you use AI. What is your familiarity with this tool? Okay. On the other hand, students who are engaged, in theory, all of the chatbot conversations are entirely private and confidential. But a worrying thing is that students are engaging the chatbot and then they are texting copies of that conversation to their friends. Okay, so now we've gone from a private chat with a chatbot to social media, which is dangerous. This could get out there. And young people in particular, well, I'm going to, one other danger here. So yes, young people need to learn the dangers of living their social lives in public and in ways that are preserved. And that's going to be a hard thing. The second problem that really is going to require legislation, and maybe we'll get some. I'm normally not a Ted Cruz fan, but he did manage to pass a bill that makes it illegal for you to put someone's head on a naked body. But right now, there are chatbots that will engage in completely inappropriate conversations with young people, conversations of a sexual nature, conversations about self-harm and suicide. Okay. That is the kind of thing that needs to be regulated. We know very well that these conversations are harmful to young people, as are certain kinds of social media things. And until Congress acts, nothing will happen. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg has already made it very clear with regard to Meta that he doesn't intend to put any restrictions on his chatbots. By the way, the other thing that's happening is Meta is putting chatbots, inserting them into Instagram and Facebook, pretending to be like real people.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. It made me think of your conversation earlier about
Yeah.
even within the church, right? I mean, like this guy, your student, he's a Calvinist, So whatever you talk about, that's what you're going to get, right? But it
Right.
does beg the question, right? Chatbots, as you've shown, are
Mhm.
pretty easy for us lay people to learn how to generate. I mean, I could probably get off this call and figure out how to upload a bunch of John Wesley's journals and sermons,
Oh yeah.
give it to my people to chat with John Wesley if they want to. But how responsible am I then
Right.
for the output that people get when they ask their questions? And what happens if I upload something from, I don't know, Satan's Book of Death, you know what I mean? And
Yeah,
tell
yeah.
people that they're talking to Jesus, you know what
Yeah.
I mean? And then Jesus starts telling them to do all kinds of crazy stuff because of the source code that it's the source material that it's using. Am I
Yeah.
responsible for that? Or I think that's where it gets kind of fuzzy for me.
Well, and there's a couple of things here. One is you'll notice that when we had our chat with Maya of Sesame's Maya, that she was very upfront. I'm a robot, right?
Right.
I'm a computer, I'm circuits. Okay. Um, it is easy to program any of the chat bots to open that way. Remember, I'm a chat bot that was created by Robert Hunt. I'm not actually Tertullian. I'm not actually, okay. Um, or to introduce it that way to the students, which is what I do. You know what you're getting into. It's ChatGPT. But the responsible ethical use of these things, in other words, what you say with John Wesley, do you want to poison it by putting non-Wesleyan works in? Okay. Who's going to tell you not to? Right now, nobody. In religion, this is particularly difficult because while it's relatively easy with their political will to regulate the chatbots and to insist, for example, that they not have underage users, that they announce who they are. They can be created, for example, if someone chatting with them brings up the idea of self-harm or suicide. Remember, I said the chatbot is listening to everything going in and filtering it. It's not hard at all for the chatbot to have a filter in advance that the first thing's, oh, heard these words here. We're stopping now, and I send you a message that says you need to call the suicide prevention hotline. Right? That is very possible and doable. And the responsible chatbot makers build in those things. Right? They're listening for humans that are going too far. But there are the chatbot makers that are not responsible. Okay. Can that be legislated? It probably can, but not with religion. Because the Constitution of the U.S. says that Congress will pass no law related to the religion. So unless it's something that actually and immediately causes physical harm to a human being, then religious freedom allows us to do a lot of very nasty things. And there's plenty of nasty people doing nasty things in the name of religion. We'll see more of that because there are people trying to create new religions online. Yeah, with an AI God. But that's that's been going on a long time in the United States. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you know what? I think we're about at our time and maybe over. I want to invite anybody that's listening. I'll take more questions if you have any. But otherwise, I'm just going to remind you, we talked about three things. We talked about the ways in which the developments in our history and our society have set us up to be particularly vulnerable to thinking about ourselves and humans in different ways because of artificial intelligence. I talked about how it actually works, and I tried to put an emphasis on the fact that these are computers. They're incredibly complex computers, but they are essentially computers. They're all brain. There's no soul. There's no mind. They're very clever, but they've got no ethics. They've got no morals if we don't give them ethics and morals. Um, and we need to therefore, for all of their fantastic abilities, we need to never attribute to them something that is human in intelligence. And then today we talked about some of the use cases. If this is something you want to do, by the way, or mess with it, ChatGPT, you can get the free version. And absolutely the best way to find out what it will do would be to ask it. Just ask it, can you do this for me? Can you do this for me? It'll tell you no. I mean, you can ask it, can you drive my car to Walmart? And it'll say, well, no, I'm a chat bot. I can't drive your car for you. But it'll probably offer to tell you how to get to Walmart.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating stuff. And again, I would encourage everybody, I know I sent everybody the link to Dr. Hunt's new book. I would encourage you to do that. So I'm looking, it doesn't look like there's any other questions. So I guess we can kind of wrap things up here. Any other closing comments, Dr. Hunt, before we end our time together?
No, thank you very much, Jerry, for this opportunity. Yeah, I would love it if you'd buy my book and give me a 5-star review on Amazon too while you're at it. But really, I hope that you'll take this seriously. And I hope you understand, I think there's enormous potential for the use of AI to be helpful and beneficial in our society. Some fields like medicine, for sure, could be utterly life-changing. I think research and things, it's going to change a lot of things. It'll help us do a lot of things better. But we cannot turn thinking over to AI. We have to think, and we cannot turn our human relationships over to AI. We have to relate to each other. We have to learn how to relate to each other. And we need to hold on to our humanity, because that's what we have that's valuable.
I think that's what's the most fascinating thing I've heard you say so far is that we have this tendency to create all of these amazing tools and we have this ability to understand how they work, but then we start conflating the efficiency of these tools with our own human minds, and then that distorts what historically and traditionally we've understood a human being to be, which is something else other than just a predictive data processor, right?
Right.
And on the surface, that may seem kind of, well, of course we do, but I think when we get it messed up, it tends to blow itself into a lot of different ways about how we have relationships with each other and the way that we think of others. That's almost kind of insidious, right? It's not on the surface, but we're doing things in a way that relates to the way we think other human beings operate and the way we operate.
Yeah.
And, even our educational systems, I think, go around that. I think Wendy brings up a good point. If we're nothing more than data processors, we wonder why we don't create moral people whenever we just shove books at them all the time.
Sure.
And it's because that's not what we are, right? Like there's more to us than just data processing in our head, right?
Yeah. I mean, we are creative in ways. We relate to each other. And something to think about in this regard. And I challenge my students to think about this. There's no question that in the next 2 or 3 or 4 years, the best AIs will be smarter than the smartest humans that have ever lived. If you're just talking about processing data and solving problems, they will exceed us. They will exceed us. But look, I exceeded 6-year-olds a long time ago in terms of intelligence and data processing. I'll put myself up against any 6-year-old in the world on this. Okay. But that doesn't make 6-year-olds worthless, does it?
That's a good point. I like that.
That's not what children are good for. We all know people, or we've met people who are profoundly disabled. Maybe they've never spoken a word in their lives, right? They lack mobility, but they're human. They're valuable. We don't throw humans out because it's their humanity that's valuable. And we will have to now reaffirm our humanity and its value and the things that make us valuable for one another, valuable to the universe when it comes to it, valuable to God. So this is a challenge. This is the big challenge of AI, is to reaffirm our humanity. And I'll leave it at that.
All right. Very good. I like that. Let's end there. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Hunt. As always, it's just been a pleasure. And I can't thank you enough for taking the time to do this. And like I said, go buy that book. It's on Amazon. I'll send you the link one more time. So appreciate everybody's presence tonight and your question and engagement over the last 3 sessions. and have a wonderful rest of your evening.
See you guys.
See y'all later. Bye.